Welcome to the Personal Tanya, day 20, where we are defining the tzaddik with our game-changing inspirations from the book of Tanya in 5 minutes or so from the daily regimen of the daily schedule of the study of Tanya. Today's big idea is that being perfect, being the tzaddik, the righteous person, the righteous Jew, is so much more than meets the eye. It's actually not easy to be perfect, which really is going to bring us, eventually, it's going to bring us closer to understanding our reality, that we're probably much more relevant to the Beinani, which is the struggling Jew, than we are to the perfect Jew. There's three general levels: the tzaddik, which is the perfectly righteous; the sinful, which is the rasha; and then there's the guy in the middle who's struggling. We'll be getting to that in the next couple chapters in Tanya. But it's our understanding today that's really going to give us a proper perspective. What today's Tanya does is that it gives us an understanding of the two levels of the tzaddik that we learned at the very, very first page of the book of Tanya at the beginning of chapter 1. We learned there that there were actually two levels of tzaddik. There was a perfectly righteous tzaddik, and there was somebody who was an imperfect tzaddik. So what's the difference between them? And that's exactly what today's Tanya is going to introduce us to. Tanya does this now that we've spent 9 chapters of Tanya, understanding the epic battle within us. Understanding that within every single one of us, there's not one but two souls. There's a godly soul that's mission-oriented, and there's an animal soul that is selfish-oriented, and there is an epic battle within us. An epic battle, what are they fighting? Over our thought, speech, and action. There's only one thought at a time, one word at a time, and one action at a time, and each one wants to express itself through those three garments of the soul. So there's a fight for the animal soul wants it to be selfish-oriented, the godly soul wants it to be mission-oriented, and you are the victor when you decide what you're going to think about, what you're going to speak about, or what you're actually going to do. Now that we understand that there's this epic battle within us, we need to understand, it's important to say at the outset, that only the rasha, only the wicked person, is the one who's actually manifesting the selfish animal soul in thought, speech, or action. But the tzaddik is not giving any physical, any external, practical manifestation to his animal soul. If the animal soul is being manifest in thought, speech, or action, you're a rasha, you're wicked, you're the sinful Jew. The tzaddik, the two levels of tzaddik, are talking not about actual expression of the animal soul. The question is the internal relationship with the animal soul. These are the two levels with which we're going to be talking in today's Tanya. Today's Tanya tells us that the two levels are like this. It all relates to how has the godly soul managed its relationship with the animal soul, with this great battle within. If the godly soul has entirely tamed the animal, then he's called a perfectly righteous. He's called a tzaddik, v'tov lo, tzaddik, and good is his. But if he's not entirely tamed the animal soul, if the animal soul is still a little wild, then he's called a tzaddik viralo, which is the tzaddik who still has a little evil within him. I'd like to give a quick example of this. Think of when you get into your car. If you get into your car, you don't have any fear that the car is going to do its own thing, because the car is perfectly aligned with whatever you tell it to do. Turn left, it's going to turn left. On, off, the car is going to do whatever you tell it to do. But then think of a horse and a rider. Now, the horse and the rider knows that the horse is going to do whatever he wants it to do, but there's always a little caution. You got to exercise caution when you're near the animal. I mean, it is a beast after all. So even though he's tamed the animal, nevertheless, you always have to be careful. So in both cases, the driver of the car, the driver of the horse are both in control of the situation. Nevertheless, the driver of the car has nothing to worry about. The car rebelling, so to speak, that's the perfectly righteous Jew who has totally tamed his animal soul, whereas the rider of the horse, and this is my own analogy, the rider of the horse is one who, even though he controls the horse, still knows that he's got to be a little bit careful. There is another way of expressing this, and that's in the language of Tanya. It's the perfect tzaddik and the imperfect tzaddik. And the Alter Rebbe explains that is a reference to the kind of emotion that the godly soul has managed to create with regards to the its relationship with God. So when the godly soul has a full-blown emotional love to God, that's a perfectly right. That's a tzaddik gomer, a perfect tzaddik, perfectly righteous. But if it's an imperfect love to God, then it's an imperfect. It's a tzaddik she'ena gomer, a tzaddik who's not perfect. And I just want you to think about, again, I'm going to give my own analogy to this. Imagine you're in a relationship with your wife. You could love your wife with pure love. Or you could love your wife because of what she does for you. And now you still love her, but you don't really love her in and of herself. You love maybe a more of a selfish kind of love. So there's different levels within love, right? And that's the same way in our relationship with God. We're absolutely called upon to have a deep, mature, and full-blown relationship with God that is not just cerebral, but actually emotional. The perfect tzaddik is the one who has a full-blown emotional love to God and therefore has entirely tamed his animal soul, like a driver in the car, whereas the imperfect tzaddik has an immature love towards God and therefore has not entirely succeeded in taming his animal soul, maybe like a horse with its rider, and therefore he's called the imperfect tzaddik. Now, I know this might sound a little depressing when we realize that's what a high bar there is to reach a level of tzaddik, but I want to tell you in closing that it's not all or nothing. And I want you to meditate upon try to compartmentalize the 613 mitzvahs, the 613 commandments, and try to think which mitzvah there is within you in which you've managed to actually tame your animal soul to the point that your animal soul gives you no rebellion. I mean, think about it. Maybe you might have a desire for non-kosher food, maybe, and you might not have tamed your animal soul. But when it comes to murder, you don't have any animal soul. You don't have any desire to rebel. And maybe in that case, you might have already achieved the tzaddik status if you can compartmentalize the various parts of your life. And of course, we can try to stretch the envelope. That's a wrap. Let's try to apply. You can do this.